Hey, what's happening, everybody? Welcome to the program. It's the Jeff Gerstmann Show for September 17th, 2024. My name is Jeff Gerstmann. I'm hosting this week's installment of the show. They said, well, you're the sickest one here, so you should host. And I said, fucking A, you got that right, buddy. I'm sick AF. Picked up my kid's cold last night. My daughter's been, the kids just cough. I don't know. This was a friend of ours said, oh yeah, she's going to kindergarten and she's just going to have this she's going to get the cough. She's going to get the wet cough and she's going to have that for like 4 months. And you're like, well, oh, is that bad? Is that bad? Or is it just, okay, kids just get that. Okay. All right. And her kids are old enough that it's not like, that they were this age pre-COVID. So it's not like a thing with that. It's just, kids just cough forever. And my daughter's been coughing forever, and it hasn't really been a big deal until right now when her brother and me are now both fighting for our lives. No, I don't know, whatever, it's fine. I last night was crazy. We've got cold medicine and stuff, but like in the heat of the moment, you're like rummaging around and everyone else is asleep and you're like, oh God, I gotta find something right now. This is coming on. This is happening. And so you're just like rummaging around. I'm like, okay, here's some store brand Dayquil. And I'm looking it up going like, does Dayquil actually get you wired? Or is like, okay, no, it doesn't. It's just a different formula that is not going to make you as drowsy as NyQuil. And so I was like, well, okay, all right, then I can take some Dayquil. And it's, I'm sure it is ultra. In fact, I have it sitting right here. How expired is this store brand? Oh, not too bad. It expired in January of this year. So that's not, in the grand scheme, that could be way worse. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's just been a snotty, yucky mess, but whatever. I feel better this morning than I did last night. I had one of those great, I don't mind it. In the moment, it sucks. In the moment, you're like, oh my God, I'm like losing my mind. But like on the other side of it, I'm like, I had a really fun, weird, fucking delirious adventure last night. I could not sleep. I could not sleep. I eventually, after 3 a.m, I finally got some sleep. But I realized the thing I needed to do for my sinuses was to prop a pillow up and sleep sitting up. And that ended up working out fine. But in the meantime, all of that, I was listening to some music and then I thought that I took my headphones out, but I didn't. And there was just all this, you just go on an adventure. And it's not like I was so messed up on cold medicine. I took a Dayquil at 7 o'clock and this is midnight. And I'm like, where am I? What's happening? And I don't know. That can be fun sometimes. You gotta roll with it. It's like, hey, these kids are going to be sick for the next 4 to 5 years. Good birthday present for my son who just turned 3. And that's very exciting. We had a birthday get together. Got this really big bouncy house with a slide on it. I was excited to get in and mess around with it. But I screwed up my back. You get to a certain age and you do stuff like, I woke up and my back was destroyed. All right, well, I'm just going to hobble around here. And so I was not able to get into the bounce house, which was a bummer because that's been half the fun of having birthday parties for these kids. Is oh man, I finally get to get into bounce. I don't think bounce houses existed when I was a kid, but whatever. But yeah, I don't know. It was a good time. He just wanted the bounce house. He was, he's 3. He's not asking for specific toys. He just was like, I want a Blue's Clues bounce house. You're like, we're on it. Okay. We can very much do that. We can absolutely do that. Yeah, I don't know. A good time was had by all. There was questionable pizza. You know, it's a kid's birthday party. What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do, right? All right. Let's take a quick break, and we're gonna get back and talk about. We're gonna talk about the PlayStation 6. You know, the latest breaking news. All right, stay tuned. Data about your body. It's cool. It's cool to get your hands on that information, and then figure out if you're gonna do anything about it, or just kind of monitor it, or just look at the numbers and go, huh. No matter what your goals are, if you want to track your metabolism, Lumen is here. Lumen is the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a device that measures your metabolism through your breath. And then that goes into an app, and it lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs, and gives you tailored guidance to help improve your nutrition, workout, sleep, or even stress management. All you do, first thing in the morning, breathe into this thing like you're trying to start a car, but not, you know what. And you'll know what's going on with your metabolism, whether you're burning mostly fats or carbs. Then Lumen will let you know, like, hey, if you're trying to meet these goals based on this measurement, then here's your personalized nutrition plan for the day. You can also breathe into it after workouts and meals, so you know exactly what's going on in your body in real time. And Lumen will give you tips to keep you on top of your health game. Hey, look, your metabolism, it's the body's engine. It's how your body turns the food you eat into the fuel that keeps you going. It's an interesting thing to track, especially, as your, age is changing and all this other stuff is happening. People always say, like, oh, your metabolism slows down, blah, blah, blah. Well, don't you just want to know? If you want to know, it's Lumen, baby. If you want to take that next step in improving your health, go to lumen.me/JeffG to get 15% off your Lumen. That's lumen.me/JeffG for 15% off your purchase. And thanks to Lumen for sponsoring the episode. All right, let's talk about it. The PlayStation 6. This is a dumb story, ultimately, but I still decided to lead with it because, I don't know, it's very funny that this story came out basically on the heels of the announcement of the PlayStation 5 Pro. The original source on this, it's been going around kind of everywhere as people have kind of plucked this one detail out of it. But Reuters has a big story about Intel, and specifically that Intel was trying to get the PlayStation business. Meaning, instead of AMD, who has been, putting chips into PlayStations for the past couple of generations here, that Intel was making a play for that, and they were at least having talks. Which, of course, right? I think every generation, it probably makes sense for Sony on the Sony side even to go and have talks with all of the chip makers and go, hey, we're thinking like we're gonna do something in 2028 or 2027 or something. Like, what do you got? What are you going to have in this specific price range, in this specific, wattage, and what can you do for us? And it sounds like that Intel went back and forth on that stuff, but in 2022, according to sources that spoke with Reuters, the PlayStation 6 chip contract went to AMD. And so that's a whole 2 years ago that they were deciding on, basic architecture stuff like that. Which again makes, I think, a lot of sense. It's easy to want to sensationalize all of this and go like, I can't believe they're already, but like, dude, they ship a console and then they're like, okay, what do we think is going to be next? And they start making early guesses about where they're going to be in 5 years, 8 years. I'm sure they start at least like specking out like, here are the pain points that we know about on the console we just shipped. And we think things are going to go in this direction. And so we might want to have more RAM next time out. We might want to have, sure, of course, we'll want everything to be faster. And they're like, well, are we happy with the architecture? Are developers happy with the architecture? And they're like, I don't know, let's do research. And they go out and they talk to everybody and they go like, oh, what do you think? What do you think? You like what we've been doing, or should we change it up? But the kind of the big sticking point here is backwards compatibility. Obviously, with AMD chips in existing PlayStations, if they stay the course on that stuff, that is likely to be less work for them next time around to kind of maintain a chain of compatibility that crosses now probably multiple generations. The bit in the Reuters story here is console chip designs typically try to ensure compatibility with earlier versions of the system to allow users to run older games on the new hardware. Moving from AMD, which made the PlayStation 5 chip, to Intel would have risked backwards compatibility, which was a subject of discussion between Intel and Sony engineers and executives, the sources said. Ensuring backwards compatibility with prior versions of the PlayStation would have been costly and taken engineering resources. Allowing PlayStation users to play games they have purchased for older systems is a feature Sony often includes in a next generation system. And that's sort of it. That is the rest of it is like, oh, they could not meet in the middle on money. They couldn't figure out like, hey, how much profit should Intel, or how much money should Intel get per chip that they provide to Sony for the PlayStation. Like, they could not agree on a number there. And so Sony ended up going with AMD. And AMD has kind of that built-in advantage there of the backwards compatibility story being at least like, well, yeah, according to these sources, it would be costly and take a lot of time to ensure backwards compatibility if they changed over to Intel. And so Intel loses again. they've I don't know, man. Intel seems to be I don't know, whatever. Intel's fine. But like they seem to be kind of eating a lot of shit when it comes to new businesses. It's not like that they are massive providers for AI stuff, which is, what all these chip manufacturers want to be doing. While they can. Like, hey, let's make this money while it's there. While these AI companies still exist, let's sell them a bunch of fucking hardware. Who cares? Obviously, no one is commenting on any of this stuff. They say they reached out to companies, Broadcom and Sony and AMD and all this other stuff, and they're like, nah, no comment. But it says that Sony is, or rather that Intel is looking for a marquee customer. Because they've got foundries that are out there ready to make chips. They just need someone who will make them, who wants the chips. I just bought an Intel machine after going with AMD last generation. When I decided to upgrade this streaming setup, I went with the 14th generation Intel chip, and updated all the microcode and everything to make sure that it doesn't burn out and explode like all of the past couple of generations of chips seem to be doing, which is cool. But between that and, like Intel had some layoffs lately and they were like, hey, we're kind of going to focus on our core businesses. That got me thinking like, oh, well, are people seemed interested in those ARC cards, the GPUs that Intel was putting out there. They weren't like top of the line hardware or anything like that, but they had some nice little features here and there. And so you have to imagine, like, if they're going to focus on their core business, does that mean that the ARC line, which wasn't really, didn't seem like it was a major factor. If you go look at the Steam charts of hardware and all that, like, it didn't seem like a bunch of people were lining up to buy Intel GPUs. You wonder if that ends up going away, so yeah, I don't know. That's it's interesting, like maybe Xbox will use Intel stuff. Who can say? Probably unlikely that Nintendo's next platform will use any Intel hardware. I think that's pretty much locked down, right? That they're going to stick with some of their NVIDIA, some of the stuff that they've used last time around. Again, for similar reasons, right? Like let's just make a more powerful version of the thing that we make, and then hopefully backwards compatibility will be a little bit easier along the way. That's become, I feel like backwards compatibility has become an even bigger story over the past 5 or 10 years here, especially right now, where you've got situations like Capcom is relying on backwards compatibility in some cases, because like they're putting out these fighting game collections only on the previous generations of consoles, because they know like, oh well, yeah, this is an Xbox One game and a PS4 game, but like those run fine on the current models, and it's a 2D sprite of Doctor Doom. Like it's fine. It's gonna look, it's not gonna like it's gonna look any different. So they've been relying on backwards compatibility, or forwards compatibility, I suppose, is the technically correct term to use in this situation. Like pretty directly. And man, any story about the PlayStation 6, and like to be clear, this is something that we're talking about, things that happened 2 years ago, and we're talking about a console that's probably not going to be out for another 3 or 4 years. Right? I mean, like when do we think a PlayStation 6 is potentially possible? Or I guess why would they make one? Is probably the larger conversation to have right now. Whether that ends up being 2027, 28, somewhere in that lane. Will they still be making PlayStation 4 games then? Will users want that? Like the reaction to the PlayStation 5 Pro, and its pricing and all of that makes you kind of look at it and go like, okay, well, what, and what could they do? And hey, we're talking about things that are potentially 3 or 4 years down the line. And so advancements in technology between here and there, there is a little bit of like, oh, who can say to that? But like, you can kind of say. And so if we're putting out a PlayStation 5 Pro at $700 or whatever it is, whatever it is by then, if they ever lower price on it. But if they don't, and you're like, hey, we got a PlayStation 5 and it's still $500, and we got a PlayStation 5 Pro and it's still $700. Here's a PlayStation 6. What then? Are they going to come out and say like, oh, well, it's $1,000 freaking dollars, or are they just going to go like, oh, well, we actually want people to upgrade because, we are going to eventually make games that will only appear on this platform, and so we need to get it in people's hands, and so we need to reset and go back to like $500 price range or whatever. And the lack of price cuts over the course of this generation, and the thing of like, oh, hey, we're, even controllers are going to be slightly more expensive, and everything, and PC adoption rates of high-end graphics cards, and what does that mean for the next series of NVIDIA hardware and the AMD equivalents? Or, well, AMD's in a different situation, right? Like AMD is still not necessarily pursuing that like flagship, best card in the world type of thing. Like they're just trying to grow market share. There was an interview with the AMD guy recently where he was just like, yeah, we need more people to own our cards, and you don't do that by putting out $1,500 cards. You do that by putting out $400 card, $500, whatever. You do it by putting out significantly more affordable hardware, and then once you've grown your market share, then you can afford to go like, hey, we're gonna make high end weird shit because we can do that now. Will that pan out for them? I don't know. It feels like they've been trying to do that for a while now, and it hasn't necessarily paid off. But the next FSR revision sounds nice for whatever that's worth, and there's stuff on that side as well that is definitely happening. But all of that adds up to just like how much I think some of the editorials and some of the things that people have been spitting about the PS5 Pro have been around this idea of just like, dude, how good do these games need to fucking look? How much rounder do the tires need to fucking get? Like, how good do these reflections need to be to, like we're hitting such diminishing returns. Like, it was funny seeing people like putting up the screenshots of, because Sony, when they put up their PS5 Pro presentation, they're like, here it is running on a regular PS5 and here it is running on a Pro, and you look at it and you go like, yeah, okay. Like, yes. In this static A/B comparison, do I look at this and go, oh, okay, yes, I see a couple of spots where this window, you can see through it now and it's not opaque, or, or what have you. The majority of the market just doesn't seem to care. And so you start to wonder, like, how many years will be spent selling PlayStation 5s in the PlayStation 6 generation? Like, have we just hit a point where, or we've hit a point where, like, what are you going to do with graphics that's going to, like, meaningfully sell consoles to the mainstream, especially in a world where the biggest games in the world are not pushing that hardware at all, or not pushing that hardware, to its limits, right? When a PlayStation 6 comes out and people go like, all right, how does it play Fortnite? They're going to load it up and they're going to go, yep, that looks like Fortnite. That looks like Fortnite looked on a PS5. That looks like Fortnite looked on a PS4. That looks like Fortnite on a PlayStation Switch. I mean, does it run better? Yes. Obviously, does the Unreal Engine 5 scale to different varieties of hardware in ways that, get you better lighting? And, like, of course. But at the end of the day, I don't think Fortnite's a particularly great looking game. There's some cool features in that engine that they are taking advantage of that you don't necessarily see. But at the end of the day, that Roblox, GTA 6 seems like something that could very directly benefit from that sort of stuff, because that'll be a newer game that is optimized in certain ways, and I'm sure that they'll, they would love to have a little bit more power at their disposal. But we're seeing this situation where more and more of the big games need to target a wide variety of hardware across multiple generations, if you want to look at it that way, but also, different levels of PC support. They need to support the low end because, these free-to-play games live and die by their ability to attract users on a constant basis. And if users can't get through the door because the system requirements are too high, then they're not going to play it because they won't be able to. You'll lock out a huge number of potential consumers. And so, you have this situation where right now, like we're seeing it right now, Call of Duty still coming out on the previous generation. And, like the idea of chasing after the high end graphics market is, foolish if you're doing it at the expense of targeting lower end hardware, right? I mean, that's just common sense. If you're trying to sell games, if you're trying to get games into people's hands so that they monetize and buy skins or whatever the fuck it is you're selling, you don't make a game that only runs on a fucking 4090. You don't make a game that only runs on a PlayStation 6. Unless that thing sells far and away so many units and the install base is so huge, or they've gotten so many years away from the PlayStation 5 that it no longer makes sense, or, like the tipping points that have to tip in those sorts of situations don't tip very easily. If they did, they would have all tipped by now, right? And we wouldn't be talking about PlayStation 4 games. EA put out a video of Jedi Survivor running on a PS4 Pro. Like, they put out a trailer and they're like, recorded on a PS4 Pro. And I was like, oh, right, yeah. Weird. It's weird to see them like market it and push it and be like, no, this version's coming and now people can play it. If they didn't buy a PlayStation 5, they can still play the game. Like, it's cool. It's smart. It's just weird to see it this many years in that they issued a trailer specifically for their previous generation release. They're smart to do it, but strange days. And as I think about, will these days get less strange? No, I don't think so. I think as we run into new console territory, and again, so what I was meaning by saying, like, does Sony need, what's the trigger that makes Sony say we need a PlayStation 6? And some of that stuff is almost competitive in nature, right? Like, if Sony didn't have to put out a PlayStation 6 and people weren't necessarily clamoring for it, they would wait as long as they could. But because there is still something resembling competition in this market these days, if they aren't out there with their R&D teams figuring out what's next and figuring out the time frames and all that other stuff, then eventually Microsoft comes along with something and goes, look at this. And people go, oh my God, Marcus Phoenix has never looked better. This siege mode is blowing my mind, you know, whatever it is. And then, you know, the scales tip again in favor of, you know, and maybe that'll happen, you know, if Microsoft can launch first with catch Sony on the back foot a year early and with something that's like markedly more powerful and they got the right games. I mean, these are a lot of ifs. These are the same ifs that we've been saying, like, if Microsoft could do this, and this, they'd be crushing it. But, you know, the turn of a generation is when all of that stuff actually does happen. And we'll see. I think that, you know, and you know, we'll see, but I do think that by the time we get to these new consoles coming out, you're already seeing the shine coming off of a lot of this AI bullshit, right? Specifically the LLMs and whatever else. Like, you know, people, you're seeing stories going like, oh, turns out people don't want this fucking dumb shit. And turns out when you market a thing by saying it's artificial intelligence, there's a growing segment of the population who doesn't want anything to do with it. Huh. So for Microsoft to be out there a while ago saying like, well, this is the most powerful thing, we, you know, and kind of talking a little bit about AI stuff, combined with, look, man, Microsoft is as all in on this AI bullshit as they could get. We'll talk about that in a minute here, because I think that's responsible, or that, you know, some of that stuff is probably responsible for some of the recent layoffs over there. And so, yeah, if they're already doing these studies and already showing that, you know, hey, if we market a thing as AI, people don't want it, and people are starting to realize the cracks in oh, look at the AI magic. It's like, no, this is actually fucking dumb. Like, from an end user perspective, will there be places somewhere in the workflow where people try to use that shit? Yes, they're trying now, and by and large, it's been shitty. But, you know, at the end of the day, you know, if we grow the definition of AI to include actual real technologies and not just fucking Fantasyland bullshit, then you do end up eventually encompassing things like DLSS, you know, and upscaling technologies and stuff like that are technically uses of AI because they're technically training on models and all of that sort of stuff. And that's not the worst idea in the world, but, you know, so that stuff will only become more relevant as time goes on, especially as developers want to try to push crazy technology as hard as they possibly can. But like, I don't know. Like, it seems like by the time we get to these new consoles coming out, that stuff will be as cold as it gets, you know? And the idea of going like, we've got an AI video game that talks to you like you're a person. No one's going to want any of that fucking shit. The first Nintendo Switch 2 game has been announced. We're there. We're finally there. It is a sequel to My Time at Porsche, according to Eurogamer, called My Time at Evershine. It's from Pathea Games, and it will launch on future Nintendo platforms yet to be announced, as well as PC, PS5, and Xbox Series X and S. It's interesting, you know. It's always something that you're just like, oh, okay. Like when it was Dark Sector for the Xbox 360, and you're like, all right. Weird glaive game, okay. Those first early announced games always seem a little bit weird. This one's even weirder because it's something that's going to Kickstarter. I don't know. It's really strange. The first Nintendo Switch 2 game is going to be on Kickstarter. What? And so I guess more to come. That's normally, normally a hardware manufacturer really wants to, and that's why they say, obviously because it doesn't even have an official name or whatever. They say future Nintendo platforms yet to be announced. Usually before a developer gets to say that, they have to have, especially this early in a cycle, before the hardware's out or whatever, for them to be able to get out there and market more directly and say, yes, we're coming to Nintendo's next platform. Nintendo usually wants to have, and I assume it's still this way. I don't know for sure, but traditionally it was always like you kind of had to get concept approval from the hardware manufacturer, and they would be like, yeah, that seems like a game we'd license. And maybe that's different now because everyone just self-publishes and it's just the market is different, but it used to be a much more controlled process of who got to say, hey, we're making a thing for the thing. And so this just seems like them just getting out there and saying it without even thinking about that stuff. And I wonder if Nintendo is just like fucking pissed. And they're just like, ugh, these fucking guys. Great. The first game for our new platform has been announced, and it's going to be a Kickstarter. That's a good look. That's the look we want to, yeah, that's how we want to be out there in the marketplace. Thanks, guys. So yeah, I don't know. Microsoft has cut is in the process of cutting another 650 jobs from the gaming team. This happened last Thursday. A message went around to employees, and of course, immediately leaked. This message came from one Phil Spencer. For the past year, our goal has been, it is a very typical, hey, we're cutting jobs. As part of aligning our post-acquisition team structure and managing our business, we have made the decision to eliminate approximately 650 roles across Microsoft Gaming, mostly corporate and supporting functions, to organize our business for long-term success. I did hear that it was going around that some of the Call of Duty mobile team was caught up in this. Because that game was maybe not doing as well as they wanted it to. I don't know if that's the case or not, but that has been the word going around. With these, so some of these sound like the cuts are being made for the reasons when you buy a company, right? The redundancies that are involved in like, oh, we're merging all these departments and we don't need all these business functions anymore. We don't need this sort of stuff. Like we have a team over here that already does this. And so we're going to eliminate these positions. Like that's how and why companies buy companies or make those acquisitions work and make those acquisitions profitable. Right. But the one thing they do say is no games, devices, or experiences are being canceled, and no studios are being closed as part of these adjustments today. Which is like, oh, great. So now what? Now some of these teams have fewer people there to achieve what is almost certainly the same goals they had before. Like what do you? That doesn't. That's not great. But again, if it's, if these are teams that are maybe outside of those kind of outside of the scope of some of that stuff, then that could certainly not be as dramatic as it sounds. Throughout our team's history, we have had great moments and we have had challenging ones. Today is one of the challenging days. I know that going through more changes like this is hard, but even in the most trying times, this team has been able to come together and show one another care and kindness as we work to continue delivering for our players. Except for the 650 people that are no longer providing for those players. That's not, I don't know. There's no great way to write a layoff message. There's no perfect way to write it. There's always going to be something that you read and go like, this is callous. But It's a callous process. It always is. Um, but yeah, yeah. I don't know. It's annoying, and you start to back that into what Microsoft is becoming as a company and what they're trying to accomplish. And the amount of money they are dumping into AI and the AI services that they have put out onto these Windows machines, um, the Copilot stuff and the Copilot Plus PCs that they're shipping, and like it just none of that stuff is vital. And to see Microsoft like contort itself into these different ways and see them continue to just like dump money onto OpenAI through their partnerships, whether it's money or cloud credits or whatever. Like watching that company try to dump, that's something that's only going to put more strain and stress on every single department around the company as they try to figure out what they need to become next, right? So remember, Microsoft wanted to become a services company. And not long after that, Microsoft was like, okay, we've got Game Pass over here in the Xbox team. We're rolling out a service. It's another subscription. We already have Xbox Live Gold, and that's been a popular service, but we are going further in this direction because that is corporately aligned. And, well, yeah, I don't know. It just, Microsoft seems like they're in this mode of really, and it's not difficult to disable Copilot on a Windows install, having just done it for the now third time across 3 different Windows machines. It's a very easy thing to disable. But to see them want to grow that AI division and have it be one of the key pillars of the company, and obviously, that's they would not be investing as much money and as much time and everything into OpenAI if that was not something that they wanted to get out of it. Meanwhile, on the OpenAI front, as they're raising money, they're saying things like, well, think of any money that you give to us as potentially more like a donation, and maybe this will never be profitable, and and all of that. You're just like, how much money is the tech industry going to set on fire? How many more jobs are going to be lost? Like, even if it's not directly because of like AI happened and then this happened, if it's like AI happened and the strategy pivoted, and as a result, 650 people over here suddenly found themselves on the short end of the stick. It's not great. It's not great. And I think it's gonna, I don't know. Like I could very easily see this being something that, if Microsoft really does try to chase it across multiple products, across multiple divisions, if this becomes something of a mandate, not entirely unlike their push to services and the things that happened to Xbox as a result of the push to services, this could leave them with a really dumb looking console next time out. If that bubble completely bursts and they've devoted some chunk of their CPU to, they're like, oh, we've dedicated this to AI. And like, oh, it turns out no one wants that. And oh no, what do we, oh boy. It's sort of like when Apple says like, oh man, look at our fucking hot new A18 Bionic blah, 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 blah CPUs. And we've devoted a full chunk of this to working on Apple Intelligence. And you're like, that's cool. So you're selling me a chip that like a third of it is something I'm barely ever going to use? That sounds fucking awesome, dude. Thanks. Oh, let me erase this person from this photo. Like, okay, yeah, sure. Like, that's fun sometimes. The use of all of this fucking AI gimmick bullshit has been fun. Like, oh, look, it wrote something. It thinks it can think. Look at the dumb machine. Think it can fucking think something up. Oh, look, it's funny because it's like almost there, but it's super not. Like it. Once you get past that fucking gimmick stage, you're like, oh, well, I wouldn't ever want to use this for anything actually real because I'm not a fucking idiot. Jesus Christ. Why don't we take another break? We'll come back. We got the Annapurna stuff. Some more details on that. We'll talk about Battlefield, Tony Hawk, Skate even. Wow, Skate news. Be right back. If your household is anything like mine, then there is no time for anything anymore. Kids gotta get up, they gotta get dressed, they gotta get to school, they gotta get home, you gotta do their homework, you gotta help with, help get them in a bath, in bed, all that other stuff. There's not a lot of time left in the middle of all that for food. So what do? Offload the food prep to someone else. Fuel up with Factor's no prep, no mess meals, and you can meet your wellness goals. Thanks to this menu of chef-crafted meals with options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto, Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are getting gum out of someone's hair, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great-tasting meals. Make today the day you kickstart a new healthy routine. What are you waiting for? They've got 35 different meals and over 60 add-ons. And this is like, proper food, real ingredients, all this other stuff. Treat yourself. They've got premium ingredients like filet mignon, shrimp, blackened salmon. They've got like cold pressed juice that was nice to, just kind of like start the morning with one of these different juices and, apple, kale and all that, like all of that sort of stuff. A nice, refreshing way to get the day going. You can choose from those 6 menu preferences no matter what your goals are. If you're trying to stay keto or just, you need more protein in your life, all that other stuff. Factor's got it. Factor's got you covered. These meals show up right to your door, ready to go into your fridge. And that's it. 2 minutes. Boom. You're eating food. It's nice. Head to factormeals.com/JeffG50 and use the code JeffG50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code JeffG50 at factormeals.com/JeffG50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. Okay, so this Annapurna stuff, we talked about it last week. For the past couple of weeks, really, because this all started with an interesting announcement. This all started with the announcement that Remedy was going to be working with Annapurna on Control 2 related stuff, and that, some of the Remedy intellectual properties would be available for use in television and film and so on by Annapurna. And in conjunction with that news, there were a couple of guys from Epic that were going to be going over to Annapurna. You remember that Epic published Alan Wake 2, and so, in some ways it's keeping some parts of that relationship together. Also, one of those guys is Hector Sanchez, who is one of the guys who started Annapurna Interactive back in 2016 with a handful of other folks when they built that team. And so I was like, oh, that sounds like it's interesting. It's like the Annapurna team has been by and large doing really good stuff. And, maybe their hit rate wasn't what it was back when they started. But, generally speaking, Annapurna seems like a good place for a lot of that stuff. The entire team at Annapurna, the entire existing team, including all of the other folks who co-founded or who started this game division back then. A lot of them came out of, I guess it was Sony Santa Monica, right? Or they were just like parts of Sony. They all split. It was like 25 people bounced and said, enough is enough, we're done. Some of this has been reported, and I've been talking to a couple of different people that were, if not in the mix directly, then very adjacent to this stuff, and it doesn't sound great. It sounds like that the way I had it broken down to me was basically Annapurna was doing really good, and then maybe some of their TV and movie stuff was not doing as well. And so the founder, Megan Ellison, daughter of Larry Ellison, the guy who just recently said some dumb shit about surveillance. Look it up. It's like, we should just have cameras on everybody all the time. Then there wouldn't be as much crime. It's like, it's a really insane, like, oh, this sounds like something a billionaire would say. Sounds like that she got very got much more directly involved with the gaming division because it was the one bright spot left at Annapurna. And as a result of that, and I had it described to me as meddling, that was just not a good environment anymore to work in because of kind of what she was involved with. It sounds like some of the reporting, Jason Schreier has a story out there as well, kind of saying like that they were in talks to spin it out. They were like, hey, why don't we spin Annapurna Interactive out and we'll go over here and do our thing, and you guys do whatever it is you're going to do with bigger games, AAA stuff. If you want to go do this Remedy deal, whatever it is, and we'll stay over here and do the thing that we're really good at. And they'd also built some kind of internal development as well. And it sounds like that those talks fell apart. And so all of that crew, again, some of them have been there since I want to say 2016 is when that all started up. Bounced. There's like, nope, we're out. Kind of a one too many broken promises sort of deal is how I've had it painted to me a couple of times. So now you've got, basically a clean slate, and you've got this Remedy deal. Thomas Puha, who's manages, what's his actual title? Communications director at Remedy. And a good dude, I will say. Ended up having to post to Twitter because of all of this shit being stirred up. Many of you are reaching out about the news around Annapurna. Sorry to see what's going on to all involved. Thank you for your care. Remedy's deal for Control 2, including Alan Wake and Control AV rights, is with Annapurna Pictures, and we are self-publishing Control 2. I hope I made sense. It's 5 a.m. in Finland, and I'm jet-lagged. And so yeah, the deal with Remedy will still be in place, and that I guess that whatever Annapurna's gaming offering ends up being on the other side of this will probably look like a very different thing. When all is said and done, it's a shame. This is a situation where like I have met a handful of the people that are at the tops of some of these conversations, and this is a really good group of people. Like I was saying the week when all this happened, I was like, oh man, this seems like a really fucking cool thing and all this. And I was like, oh, okay. Yikes. Someone did mention to me that there is going to be some attempt to keep that crew together and start something up. So we'll see if they get that off the ground and start a new company and publish indie games, whatever that means these days, like publishing in the indie space has become such a weird, because some developers just kind of don't need it, or like the thing of like, what are you getting out of your publisher if you're an indie developer making a game? What is a publisher going to come in and make better for you? And some developers say nothing, like, hey, this is all stuff we can take on ourselves, and we don't need to do this, and we don't need to sign on with a publisher and have them take a cut of their money to be a middleman for this and that. Whereas some developers are like, yeah, I don't have time to figure out how to market this game. I don't have time to figure out like how to bundle this up and sell it. Like yeah, man, I don't have time to have conversations around physical copies and limited run this and that. Like, so if this company wants to step in and do that, and if they do that well, then they will have earned their percentage of the sales of this game, because we all made more money as a result. Like, that's the idea. Like, if you sign with a publisher and you go on to make less money than you would, which, hey, how would you know, right? But if you sign with a publisher and you end up owing them more money, or you're like, damn, I could have put this out myself and probably made more money, because 100% of it, or 100% of it would have been coming back to the company, coming back to me, coming back to the team, whatever. And keeping it smaller, then maybe that's a better way to go. But different developers are going to have different needs, and different games are going to have different requirements and everything, right? And so that's, I think, probably the actual value of a publisher in this day and age is like, hey, if you are fucking broke and you need to finish your game, let's talk. It's like those sorts of conversations, I guess, right? Yeah, weird. It's a weird one. The Bloomberg story also describes it as like that this process has left partners scrambling, and that try to figure out like what's gonna happen there, I suppose. Trying to get this story up here. New president Hector Sanchez has told developers that the company will honor existing contracts and replace staff who have left, according to people who asked not to be identified because the conversations were private. So, it sounds like that they've got deals in place and they're going to try to honor all of that stuff and keep going. Best of luck to everyone involved. This sounds like a fucking shit show of a situation. And it's a bummer. It's a bummer to hear about it. I'm like, oh man, that seems like it could have gone a different way, a cooler way, but maybe not. Today is EA's Investor Day, according to IGN, and IGN had a story yesterday about Battlefield. Not a ton of detail here. It looks like they had a conversation with Vince Zampella. They have a piece of concept art that's just a smoky Battlefield. And they're trying to pick out details on it. But like, it looks like there's a fire. Maybe there's natural disasters. I'm just like, yeah, maybe. I think the big news here, or rather the confirmation here, is that it's going to be a modern warfare kind of game. It is a modern conflict. What's the word? What's the legally appropriate way for a guy like Vince Zampella to say that? Let's see. The quote from him says, I mean, if you look back to the peak or the pinnacle of Battlefield, it's that Battlefield 3, Battlefield 4 era where everything was modern. And I think we have to get back to the core of what Battlefield is and do that amazingly well, and then we'll see where it goes from there. But I think for me, it's that peak of Battlefieldness is in the Battlefield 3 and 4 days. So I think it's nostalgic for players, for me, and for the teams even. Those are kind of the heyday. And then at the end he says, although I would say 1942 also. Which is funny because it felt like he gave that answer and then was like, oh, someone's going to be fucking pissed if I don't fucking mention Battlefield 1942. Like, but also, I mean, yeah, 1942 also. I think he's right, though. And a lot of people in chat right now are saying that the peak of Battlefield is 1942 and Battlefield 2. And I kind of agree with you. But also Battlefield has bigger fish to fry because those are games that did not come out on console the same way. I mean, Battlefield 2 Modern Combat, that doesn't really count. But if we think about the peak of the franchise as a talking point and where it was culturally, that Battlefield 3 and 4 era was, probably when they had their biggest numbers playing it because it was out across multiple platforms. So I think I tend to agree. Like I probably had my most multiplayer fun with Battlefield in 3 and 4, just in terms of hours. But Battlefield 2 is such a special game. Like Battlefield 2 is one of the greatest games of all time. Battlefield 3 and 4 are not. But Battlefield 3 and 4 are damn good games that ended up being a lot of fun to play. Even if their launches weren't amazing. IGN goes on to say that specialists will be gone. This just seems like they're going to make an old Battlefield game. And literally he says, I think we have to get back to the core of what it does and do it really well, and then we'll see where it goes from there. That sounds like they're going to strip away all of the shit. And, he's even like kind of saying like, even player counts. He's saying, yeah, the 128 player maps, did it make it more fun? Like doing the number for the sake of the number doesn't make any sense. We're testing everything around what's the most fun. So like you said, the maps, once they get to a certain scale, become different. It's a different play space, and I think you have to design around that. So we are designing something that is more akin to previous Battlefields. I'd rather have nice, dense, really nice, well-designed play spaces. And when it comes to specialists, he says, so I wasn't there for 2042. I don't know what the rationale was, but for me, it's like the team tried something new, and you have to applaud that effort. Not everybody liked it, but you have to try things. It didn't work. It didn't fit. Specialists will not be coming back. So yeah, that sounds like a good foundation for Battlefield. That honestly sounds like the best pitch for Battlefield I think I've heard since Battlefield 4. Because it's like, hey, yeah, we've been trying to do this stuff and it hasn't been working out, and we just need to go back to basics and figure out what the core of this thing is all over again. It's a shame in a lot of ways that that's kind of where they've found themselves. But I think those last, was it 2 or 3 games? They're not great. 2042, they eventually got it to a place where I think people were a lot more okay with it. But like, I think Battlefield 1 is the shits. I think it is just a fucking miserable goddamn video game. Yeah, so I don't know. I think getting back to something that's like, hey, let's make something that is identifiable, and people understand modern weapons because they play other shooters like this, and we can let's try to get our feet under us, and then from there figure out what if there's other weird stuff we want to try to do. Then we can do that. I think that's just a smart. That feels like a very smart and honest statement about the place that they've found themselves in, for sure. So yeah, I don't know. This doesn't necessarily sound like that. Like, more details on the game are right around the corner, but it is kind of the first little bit of information that we're hearing about. Where Battlefield is at. According to videogameschronicle.com, Tony Hawk is talking to Activision again. We talked about that they redid their social media accounts to kind of reference the 25th anniversary of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. And this kind of comes not necessarily on the heels of that, but this comes from something called Mythical Kitchen. I don't know. Is that a cooking podcast? I don't know. I'm guessing. He says, the legendary skater says that there is something planned for the anniversary. I wish I could tell you more, but I can tell you I've been talking to Activision again. We're working on something. It will be something the fans will truly appreciate. I mean, the Tony Hawk 1 and 2 remake was already done and is already really good. So I think, realistically, what would that be? It would be Tony Hawk 3 and 4 or a brand new game. But that seems like a quick turnaround for a brand new game. If they wanted to have it out in time for the anniversary, if we assume that, because he tells the story about vicarious visions and from his perspective, he's told that story before, because he said that the Tony Hawk 3 and 4 stuff was supposed to happen, and then when vicarious visions kind of went poof and disappeared into Diablo world, that the project just didn't move forward. So maybe we'll see that. I don't know. That's 3 and 4 would be cool to have. A new game could potentially be really cool as well. I don't know. But again, if they want to have it out for the anniversary, a new game would be weird, and potentially even rushed. Meanwhile, on the EA side of things, the Skate Twitter account has announced, we are incredibly stoked to announce that Skate will be launching in early access in 2025. will share more details on what to expect in the coming months. So, Skate will launch in some form next year, which I don't think I needed an announcement to be able to tell you that if that didn't happen, then they were going to cancel that. like, hey, that thing's not coming out in some form in 2025, then I don't know what the hell EA's doing. They're going to, but they have been playtesting that thing forever in a variety of forms. It's crazy to me that it is not already out in some kind of early access form. And to have all of this time that it feels like they've been working on it forever. It feels like they kind of missed the window in some ways of the excitement around a new Skate game. But also, they're trying to make a free-to-play thing. They're trying to monetize a different way and do a different thing. And we'll see how that all goes for them. I am interested in seeing what that game looks like when it is further along. All of the leaked footage I've seen of it and so on. Every time I've seen a bit of that game, it's been like, I hope this is an old build that you're just letting people play this part of this play test, and that whatever you've got at the studio looks way more finished than this or something. I hope this game is further along than these playtests seem to indicate, I guess I would say. And our last bit of news, Flappy Bird is back, and it's for scumbags now. This is a really shitty situation. There was a press release or something put out. It was basically like, Flappy Bird is coming back in 2025. And it's coming to you from this company called the Flappy Bird Foundation. And you're like, oh, okay. We've acquired the rights to the trademark and everything. And you're like, oh, you acquired the rights to the trademark. Okay, cool. From the original guy. Because if you don't remember, when Flappy Bird came out and blew up on phones, the developer was like, I've got to take this down. I can't deal with this. It's too addictive. Like he felt was touched by overwhelming guilt and yanked the game down. And as a result, there were situations, it was the original PT. It was a situation where, like, if you had a fucking iPod Touch or some kind of device that had Flappy Bird installed on it, you could sell it for weird amounts of money, and it was just like insane. Eventually the trademark expired and it was registered by a company called GameTech Holdings. And then those rights were purchased by this so-called Flappy Bird Foundation, as people have dug into this to figure out what the hell is going on, because then that original developer, Dong Wen, said, no, I have nothing. I have no related with their game. I did not sell anything. I also don't support crypto. And so it sounded like the trademark just lapsed, and these vultures got their hands on it and are now going to turn it into some kind of crypto fucking nightmare. Because that's the fucking garbage ass world that we apparently live in. This Video Games Chronicle story says that the Flappy Bird Foundation is being led by a designer named Michael Roberts, and that guy is the head of something called the 1208 Productions, which is a crypto firm that describes itself as pioneering Web3. And so, yes, some dirtbag Web3 company got their hands on Flappy Bird, and they're going to pump it full of fucking trash, presumably. Because that's, of course, right? It's a sad state of affairs. Not that I hold, it's Flappy Bird, like whatever, at the end of the day. But at the same time, it's really shitty. And that's going to do it for the news. Big week for new releases. UFO 50 is finally coming out. That's out tomorrow. And so presumably if I am feeling better, I am going to want to stream some UFO 50 as well as probably some Dead Rising the Dead Rising remake, which is also out this week. And I have not had a ton of time to look at that. I've had that for a little bit now, but I have not had time to get deep into Dead Rising yet. But I want to. And so as soon as my head stops spinning and as soon as I stop having to be completely doped up on a zillion different cold drugs, I'm gonna play me some frickin' Dead Rising. Very excited about it. Why don't we get into some emails, huh? I was looking over here for a button to push for the emails, but I guess I don't really have one. podcast@guard.bike is the email address. Send in your emails and I will read them, much like Grant did. And Grant simply asks, was Black good? Yes, Black was good. Black was frustrating in some ways because of the way its encounters were designed. But overall, I would say Black is cool. For its era, I would also say that Black has not aged well. Every time I go back to Black, it's not a great game. You can emulate it pretty well. You have to spend some time. If you want it to play like a modern shooter, you can get in there and remap all the controls in the game and kind of get it where you think it should be. Black, as I've said before, Black was a really amazing sales pitch. It was a really amazing E3 demo. But at the end of the day, it was a lot of encounters of dudes standing next to red barrels, and you shot the red barrels and all the dudes blew up, and then you moved on to the next thing. And it's there's aspects of that are fun and aspects of that are extremely repetitive. Fun cutscenes though. It's like it's interesting to go back to it now with what shooters have become in all the years since. Randy in Portland, Oregon writes in to ask about Jeff Keighley. He says, how do you feel about Jeff Keighley's contributions to the current video gaming dichotomy? Do you feel that the VGAs have any real merit, or are they just an ad revenue cash grab for the man? Developers and publishers have become pretty savvy at independently announcing and advertising their own new projects. So what even is the point of a summer game fest? I'm not completely cynical about Jeff's motives, but I'd say I'm mostly cynical about them. And I wonder what even is the point other than profiting off a market that no one else seems to even want to compete with. So we talked a little bit about this before, but Keighley has a team of people, and they put on, I guess, 3 shows a year, right? It's the VGAs, it's Summer Games Fest, and it's the Gamescom opening night live, right? And he is getting eyeballs on those events, whether it's something he's doing to get those eyeballs, or it is just a factor of there is an appetite out there for that type of show because people like to watch trailers, because people like to get together and watch a big thing and all of that. Like, I don't know. I can't, I'm not a big trailers guy. I don't really spend a lot of time watching trailers, but like whenever those shows come along, like there's usually something interesting about it. And is he turning a profit on it? Yes, but also he's paying a team of people to work on them for months and months and months and securing venues and doing all of this other stuff. Like, does the industry like it? They like it enough to support it. I don't know that every single company is in love with that dude and what he does. But at the same time, a lot of them do show up to these events, and a lot of them do support these events with trailers or whatever else. And I think that there's value in that. I think that I think the Summer Games Fest is actually really good. Because it is and I don't necessarily mean the live show. Like, the live show's good. It's whatever, right? But I think that the Play Days event where they're having companies show off games to the press and setting up interviews and getting everyone in one location, sort of like E3 used to do. I think that's incredibly valuable to me as someone who covers games. And that aspect of it, being able to go somewhere for a couple of days and see a lot of stuff in a short, like, efficient time frame, I think is really fantastic. I think that this industry needs something like that, and that is the kind of only thing like that happening right now. Gamescom still happens, GDC still happens, DICE still happens. Like, there are still events dotted throughout the year where developers get together, but it's never quite the same as what E3 was. And the Summer Games Fest is not quite 100% what E3 was either, but I think it's very useful for me personally. Like, I have found it to be a good use of time going to that event and seeing that stuff. But yeah, at the same time, yes, some publishers are paying money for those shows and some are not. And yeah, man, like that crew is renting these large venues and selling tickets and doing all this stuff. Like, they're trying to put on big live shows, and no one else is really doing that for the video game industry. So I don't know. Like, it's very easy to poke holes in a lot of that stuff. And yeah, an award show that is mostly important for the ads for new trailers is sometimes kind of a bummer. But it's structured that way because that's what the audience seems to want. So I don't know. I can't really fault that all that hard either. Even though as someone who has been a judge for those shows in the past, like, I care about the awards and all of that, and the speeches and everything. I think that stuff is fun too. But like, it's the trailer. Like, people come for the trailers. People come to see new announcements. Like, that's the thing drawing folks in. It isn't necessarily the speeches and whatever else. So I think you need both in order to just attract the type of attention that a show like that needs to attract. So yeah, I don't, I don't know what that dude's books look like. I don't know how profitable this enterprise is for him. I'm sure he's doing fine. But at the end of the day, I also think that, like, this industry kind of needs stuff like that, and no one else is doing it. Like, it's, at that scale. I mean, other people do put on award shows and they're kind of E3-ish presentations, but like, no one is doing it at that scale. And I think that that's important. And I think that helps the video game industry seem bigger. And sometimes it seems more like a community the way it used to. And I think that has actual real value. So yeah, I don't know. Like, I agree with you. It is very easy to be cynical about this sort of stuff because you're like, oh, he's just making money off ads or whatever. But like, I don't know. A lot of people have to fucking work on that thing. And there's a lot of people eating off of those shows, and that's cool. Various production coordinators and everything else that make those shows come together. Like, I don't know. I think that's kind of cool. So, yeah. Patrick writes in and says, I don't want to beat a dead horse too much, but I don't know what to do with a physical copy of Concord. I work in a library, and I'm responsible for the console games we offer, which led to me ordering Concord a week before it came out. Due to how our budget and ordering and supplier works, the disc arrived a week after the servers got shut down. Now I don't know what to do with the copy of Concord on my desk. Should I keep it on my desk or put it out so people can borrow it to read whatever message says they can't play anymore? I already got told that returning it would be too much of a hassle for the money. I think you need to treat it like it's an ancient tome. I think you need to treat it like it's a weird old book that people have to like fucking check with you before they get to go in the back and look at it, and it's under glass or something like that. I think you need to take a sealed copy of Concord and put it next to some, whatever Indiana Jones ass books your library is in possession of. That's what I would do with it. If they want to touch it, yeah, they got to get special gloves. They got to, there's like they got to jump through some hoops before they're allowed to see your copy of Concord. That's what I would do. Chris from Glasgow writes in and says, recently I came across a rather interesting article online in which Mr. Tekken himself, Kazuhiro Harada, went on to divulge some details about working at Bandai Namco and why we haven't seen a new Soul Calibur game in quite some time. Also, the steps he had taken to remain working on the Tekken series. He's referring to, like, Harada got out there on Twitter and said, like, hey, man, yeah, it's really hard to champion these older franchises, and why Soul Calibur, here's why Soul Calibur hasn't happened, and Ridge Racer and Ace Combat and some of this other stuff. And he kind of said, like, I'll keep fighting for it, but at the end of the day, that's what he's referring to. Will we ever see the resurgence of 3D fighters? 2D fighters seem to be doing better than ever, and yet Virtua Fighter, Dead or Alive, and Soul Calibur all never seem to be coming back. Is Tekken the last hope? So I think we will see a new Virtua Fighter. I think that's been rumored strongly enough that I do think we will see something out of Virtua Fighter. I expect that Tecmo will eventually do something with Dead or Alive again. Soul Calibur, I think, is the one I'm most like 50-50 on. Like, oh yeah, maybe I guess maybe they eventually do that, but like that's a case where, like, because of the turnover and are the right people still working at Namco, like, can they put together something? Soul Calibur is the Darkstalkers to Tekken's Street Fighter. How about that? And I think for some of the same reasons why we don't really see new Darkstalkers games, is why we don't see new Soul Calibur games. They are not necessarily as popular as the main thing. And right now they're making the main thing and they're supporting the main thing. The last couple of Soul Calibur games, like Soul Calibur just feels like it's been on something of a downward trend for a little while now. Like, was 6 the last one? And they did that like free to play thing that they also did a Tekken one of those, and that was not great. But like 5, yeah, like Soul Calibur 1. Soul Calibur 1 is an amazing video game. Some people still like 2 and 3, but like by the time 2 came out, I was good on Soul Calibur. And that franchise just, it always just felt like it was just getting a little bit more irrelevant each time they put it out. Or a little bit more up its own, it's just like, hey, here's some more fucking guest characters. And you're like, whatever. Whatever, man. And so I just don't think that there were enough people there that were genuinely interested in that game. And, it's not to say that they were necessarily bad games. They just weren't attracting a wider fan base, especially as fighting games were kind of coming back and being on the rise again. Like, they were just not poised to take advantage of that. So yeah, I don't know that Soul Calibur has a place anymore. I mean, it's sure you could do it, but that would be taking time away from supporting Tekken, putting out another Tekken. Like, if you look at the time frame between Tekken 7 and Tekken 8, could they have put a Soul Calibur out in the middle there? Sure. How would that have impacted the release of Tekken 8? How would that have impacted the ongoing sales of Tekken 7? Like, would it have cut into the popularity of their existing franchise? Like, maybe a little bit. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. But yeah, when did the last Soul Calibur come out? Did it actually come out after Tekken 7? Yeah, I guess it did, huh? That's funny. So Soul Calibur 6 came out. Oh, 2018. That's way later than I thought. It's only been 6 years. Why would you want another Soul Calibur? That's ridiculous. Now I feel like you're just being crazy. Right, that was the one that they put 2B in. Right. Yeah, I don't know. That last Soul Calibur was kind of fine, right? But I don't know. It just doesn't seem like something that we need. Or that enough people are clamoring for, I guess, is the other thing. Like I don't know. I just always, because of the way the guest character stuff played out and the popularity that gave that franchise, it felt like it was a franchise being propped up by players who don't really like fighting games all that much. Like the Soul Calibur fan base felt like they were there for the guest characters, and they were there because they remember having a Dreamcast in college. And they were just always trying to recapture that feeling, but they didn't necessarily have a love of other fighting games the same way. The same way they would need to now in order to prop up a new Soul Calibur game, I suppose, is the full thought there. And the other ones, yeah, I'm surprised that there isn't another DOA on the books. Like if we get to TGS and Tecmo, Koei Tecmo comes out and says, "Hey man, new DOA," like I would not be shocked one bit. I'd be like, "Oh yeah, it feels like it's time." And Virtua Fighter, like I said, that's been something of a non-secret for a little bit, that there was some work happening in that direction. And I hope that pans out, and I hope that pans out sooner rather than later, because I would love to play a new Virtua Fighter game. The other thing to remember is that, when we look at the Namco fighting game lineup, you also have to consider that Dragon Ball FighterZ is one of theirs. And so they're, like, didn't they just rebalance that game, like, recently? Like, they're still kind of supporting that game. So, kind of crazy. But yeah, I 3D Fighters, I like 3D Fighters. But I guess it's more accurate to say I like Tekken and I like Virtua Fighter. And DOA is a game I will never take seriously, but I enjoy. I like to load up DOA and just fucking mash shit out and whatever, man. And that's fun. And yeah, I don't know. Andrew in Seattle writes in and says, "How do you feel about Joey Valance and Bray?" Finally, the hard-hitting questions. On one hand, those guys sure do like Paul's Boutique. On the other hand, I sure do like Paul's Boutique. Check your head, and so on. Maybe one day they'll find their ill communication. Who can say? Some of their references made me feel old, but the Danny Brown seal of approval seems meaningful. Personally, I have okay. So Joey Valance and Bray, if you're not familiar, they're putting out rap records, and Joey Valance sounds a lot like they sound like the Beastie Boys. Voice-wise, vocally, it sounds like that they are trying to evoke, like Joey Valance specifically seems like he is oftentimes attempting to sound like the King Ad Rock, and Bray, if you had to paint him into a corner, you would say he is an MCA-like figure, just because he has a deeper voice, but I don't know that he necessarily earns that. And they have a lot of songs that you listen to and you go, wow, they really are trying to like chase that kind of Beastie Boys sound in the way that they rhyme and the way that they make their, the way their voices sound and everything. And there were some interviews they were doing for a while where they were very coy about that. And they would be like, oh, what? I don't know. Like they would kind of not really cop to it in a way that I thought was just kind of like maybe a little weird. They have departed from that. I think they're finding their own sound. I think, they're messing around with a lot of different sounds that in a weird way you could go like, well, if the Beastie Boys happened today, maybe this is the road they would go down. Maybe there would be more of an electronic kind of a dance vibe to some of this stuff, and maybe that would make sense. Maybe that's the direction they would go in. And I don't know, whatever. I think they're doing their thing. I can't fault it. Like they're doing their thing. They're getting, they're having fun, like, features on their stuff. And I don't necessarily go out of my way to listen to a lot of Joey Valance and Bray, but what I have heard, I think, is pretty good. There is a song with Danny Brown that I believe is called Pack a Punch, which I don't know if is that a Call of Duty Zombies reference? I don't know. The track, the remix they did with Aisha, that's real good. But yeah, I don't know, man. Like they're doing their thing. Anyway, Andrew goes on to say, personally, I have beef. Only time Super Mario's canonically done a double jump was in Super Smash Brothers, and that game is a monument to the sins of man. Because yeah, they have a song called Double Jump. It's a bad reference. It's not good when the references are wrong. But yeah, I don't know. I have been listening to the Beastie Boys again, and for the first time in kind of a while, and Hot Sauce Committee Part 2 is a really fun record that I think it gets overshadowed because of obviously the passing of MCA and the timing of all of that stuff, and when all of that happened. But like that's a really fun record. I think that they just I don't know, it's cool that they were able to explore and come up with a lot of different sounds over the course of their run. The instrumental albums they put out are things that I did not give a fuck about when they were originally coming out, and I was like in high school or kind of just after or whatever. But like going back to some of that stuff now, it's like, yeah, no, this is fucking good shit. But yeah. And then Andrew has a PS here. PS, what do you think Tony Yayo's favorite video game is? My money's on Spike Out Battle Street. Yeah, I mean, if it's not Spike Out, it's like Final Fight Streetwise. Maybe Narc, because he likes to play as Bill Bellamy and he likes to take all the drugs instead of turn them in because he loves power-ups. Let's see here. More hip-hop talk. Colin from Scotland writes in and says, I just listened to John Cena's rap album and kind of liked it. Am I crazy? Have you listened to it? What do you think? John Cena's rap album is way better than you would think it would be. John Cena is not a bad rapper. Like the stuff, because the thing, like when he was walking to the ring and like, kind of rapping as he was walking to the ring, like he did not have a track behind him. He was just kind of saying rhymes, and it was just kind of like, oh, okay, sure. All right. He's got Bumpy Knuckles on a track. Like it's fucking outstanding, man. Like there's just some good shit on that John Cena record. Like his cousin produced it. But like Cena's good, man. He can flow. He can fucking, that was when I interviewed John Cena. I asked him, when is the album coming out? That was the first thing I asked him. I said, when is the album going to drop? Yeah, man, I don't know. Like I think that a lot of that record is pretty good. There's also, he was on a fucking remix, a Merce remix with E40 on it, and it's just crazy. Like you look at the list of people that are on it, on the track, like, okay, Merce, E40, all right, that's already great. John Cena, what the fuck is going on? And it's solid, man. It's solid. John Cena can hold his own, man. He's, and now, when it comes up, like I think that like people bring it up as a joke, and I think that that's sad. When people bring it up to him in interviews and stuff, they're always like, you gonna do another record? And he's always like, well, hey, look, I'm almost 50, and it's, hey, You know, it's a young man's game. Like he's very gracious about it, but like I don't think he gets his due for actually how like above average that entire album was. And so yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's pretty good. I would listen to another John Cena record. Here he's being chilling. Maybe we could rap about that. Dorian writes in and asks, what does Astrobot's future look like? Says, I think it's nearly universally agreed at the moment that Astrobot is rapidly gaining traction as a flagship franchise. At this point, each Astrobot game has been an incredible collection of PlayStation, an incredible celebration of PlayStation, but they have almost entirely used up the well of nostalgia they've built up over the years. Will Astrobot be able to make it as a flagship franchise to rival Mario, as many are expecting, if they are so heavily reliant on nostalgia and self-reference? Will people get tired of the nostalgia at a point? And if so, what changes might they have to make to continue to succeed? Yeah, it's a good question. Sounds like it's selling all right. I think, the only thing we have right now are like the UK weeklies, like the physical weeklies. And it sounds like it's doing well on those metrics. I don't know that Astrobot is going to be like the have a Mario like run. Let's, like I know people are having a good time. It's a great fucking game. And I think it can be a great game without the nostalgia. I think if it, that game could morph to be something more than just collecting robots. You could just get stars. It'd be fine. Maybe one of the stars looks like Parappa. Fuck it. But I don't necessarily think that it has to be nostalgia. I think that it could be its own thing and still be a solid video game. That said, look, I like Astrobot a lot. I love that game. It is almost certainly one of the 10 best games to come out this calendar year. But people are rushing to anoint it as like the number of questions I've seen coming in that are like, do you think Nintendo is scared of Astrobot? Do you think that they're worried about like, oh no, someone finally figured out how to make a great platformer? Like, no. What the fuck are you talking about? It's a good, tight platformer that's more about exploration and puzzles than about like hardcore platforming. They save the kind of gameplay level of platform, the hard levels. They push those to the back. They push those to the sides. You have to find and unlock, Astrobot is about vibes, man. Astrobot is about like wandering around a level and, look at this, even if it's not the nostalgia stuff, it's like, look at these lush environments and look at, oh my God, I jumped through this hoop and it's about the wonder of like, I did a thing and it rewarded me for looking up here. It rewarded me for looking on the other side of the waterfall. It really, it's a really good game in that specific way. But to try to sit here and look at like ingrained platformer franchises that have been around for years and decades, and it's right there alongside, like, no, man, no. I would love it if Astrobot moved faster. I would love it if Astrobot's little jet boost was faster. I would love it if everything about that game was a little bit faster. It's slow because it's an exploration style game. Like there's something, and it's a platformer. I'm not going to, I'm not crazy. But when people call it a platformer, there's some dissonance that hits me in the head that I'm like, what? We're talking about Astrobot, right? And then I have to stop and go, oh yeah, yes, it is. It's a platformer. But it's not like the people that are trying to compare it to, I don't know, Mario Wonder or whatever else out there. I just don't think it like is really in that conversation. It's a great video game, but it's a different type of platformer than a lot of that other stuff. Right? And I think it's outstanding. I really love the way it looks. I really love the joy, right, of looking around a corner and finding a thing going, oh my gosh, look at this. Or like, I've freed this star from the big water level. The big water level is maybe the one part where I went like, oh shit, they made the Mario 64 big water level, didn't they? But they made it kind of less good, if we're being honest with ourselves. But they made the big water level. And like, oh wow, look at that. And there's big crazy things happening all over the place, and you know, big sea monsters, and you know, there's crazy, fun, cool stuff happening at every turn in that game. And not all of that is like cemented in nostalgia, but also most of that is not necessarily cemented in like skill-based gameplay. It's really great. I think that a lot of the comparisons to Mario Odyssey are super fucking weird, because I don't think it stands up to I think just from a pure things you can do as man with hat, I think Odyssey is and I have been playing a little bit of Odyssey lately because my daughter's been playing it. That game's fucking awesome. like I don't know when the last time you played Mario Odyssey. That's a cool fucking game. And Astrobot is a really cool fucking game, but I think it's a pretty different one, and compared to a lot of that other stuff, and so I think a lot of this conversation about where does Astrobot fall, and where, like, it just feels like a mindless conversation. Should they continue making Astrobot games? Yes, absolutely. Could they make a good Astrobot game that didn't have a nostalgia hook? Absolutely. I think what they did, the VR game, that didn't really have a huge tie into a lot of that stuff, right? So I don't know. I think that like trying to anoint it as like this is the face of PlayStation, I think is super weird, because the face of PlayStation is always going to be some sad fucking dude with a beard until the wheels fall off of that style of game. Like that is going to, you know, the face of PlayStation is whatever they can get on television, you know. And Astrobot maybe makes his way into a logo or something, but sure, you know, maybe. But at the end of the day, I would love to see Astrobot go further and further down the road of making great, like tighter, more challenging platformers. And that's maybe not demographically wise, right? If maybe they look at the age range and the skill levels of people who play Astrobot and they go, oh, that would be a terrible idea. It's entirely possible. But for me, the most fun I am having with Astrobot is in those shape levels and the stuff where it is deliberately more difficult. And the kind of just average, whatever regular levels in Astrobot are a different thing. It's not about, I've got to jump and I got to do this and the timing's really tight and I got to be very careful here and do that. You know, it's about like, I'm going to wander around and if I die, there's a checkpoint right here. Who cares? Like it's a breeze, man. That game is just like, you're fucking chilling. You and Astrobot are hanging out. Just finding robots or maybe just getting to the end. Like whatever, man. Like you're just doing your thing. And that's a great time too. But yeah, I think that they could easily make another one of those, and I also think that there's probably some nostalgia that they haven't necessarily used up yet. And yeah, I don't know. Rob from Detroit, but now in Sydney, writes in and asks, were you ever into going to BattleTech centers? Yes, absolutely. I was never close enough to one to ever really go to BattleTech centers on a regular basis. But in 1992, when I started going to Chicago for CES, because there was a spring CES or summer CES was in Chicago and winter CES was in Las Vegas. The Chicago, there was a mall in Chicago next to an arcade that had a BattleTech center. And that was right around the time they rolled out a second game called Red Planet, which is like a futuristic racing game. And this is location-based entertainment, if that means anything to you. When you go to a BattleTech center, you sign up to play like you went to a laser tag place or something. You're like, hey, here's my $20, whatever. You wait your turn, and then they take, 12 of you at a time in the back, and they give you a big, serious military briefing about what you're about to engage in. And then they load you into these cockpits. And the cockpits, they close, and you've got a big screen in front of you. You've got all these buttons and switches and everything, and you are basically playing team deathmatch with mechs. It's BattleTech. It's licensed BattleTech stuff. And so you're picking a Mad Cat and going, okay, yeah, I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna fucking stomp over here, and I'm gonna steer my mech, and I'm gonna shoot at the other guy. And the frame rate was shit because it was the 90s, and these things ran on like Amigas or something, or SGI. Like these ran on Amigas. There was another one in Mountain View, California, called Magic Edge that was a flight simulator, and those ran on SGI Sparks or something. And that was a full-on jet cockpit, and it did not do a full 360, but it would do like a 300 and then whip the other way in a way that like it felt like it might as well have been doing a 360. And so you would pay your money, I don't know, $12, $20, whatever it was. $20 sounds right, but it was probably more like 15 or something in those days. And you would play the game for 20 minutes. And then you would get a debriefing. They would hand you your score sheet or whatever, and you would leave and go sign up again and play it again in 45 minutes or whatever, depending on how busy they were. They sold instruction manuals for the mechs. Like you could buy I have it here somewhere. And so kind of the crazy thing about BattleTech was that when you got in it, it was very easy to control. You had a joystick in front of you. You had a flight stick looking thing. And you would turn, and the mech would turn, and you would go forward and back, and you would aim your shots, and you'd push all the fire buttons and shoot your missiles, and then you would overheat and be like, oh shit. And it would shut down automatically so that your heat could disperse, and then hopefully you didn't get blown up while you were overheated. But the cockpit was full of fucking buttons and switches and all this other stuff. And if you buy the manual, it turns out that all of that shit does something. So you've got foot pedals down at your feet that by default don't do anything, but there's a switch you can flip that turns on torso twist. And so once you do that, you're just aiming the upper half of your mech with the stick, and you're controlling the direction of the mech with the foot pedals. When you overheat, you can override the overheat shutdown and try to get away. You can be like, fuck that, flip these switches. Don't shut me down for heat. If I blow up, who cares? And then you could try to get away and not overheat it, or not disperse heat as quickly. Or you could try to shoot a little bit more and hope that it doesn't fucking make your entire mech fucking melt down and kill you. And so it was more like, here's advanced modes for people that want that. And it was fucking nuts. They eventually opened one in California, and I went to the opening, like the opening of it. And so they also had another game called Red Planet, and Red Planet was a racing game. It was you're on Mars doing races. It was like bad Wipeout. It was not fun. Not nearly as fun as BattleTech. And so they opened one in California, And this was, again, this is going to be like, 94, somewhere around there. The problem with these places is you needed to find like something to do while you were waiting your turn. And the easy answer would have been put an arcade in there. And the one in Chicago was right next to an arcade. It was all kind of part of the same area of the mall that had all that stuff. And that is the first time I saw John Romero in person, and I saw him from the back, and his hair was so much amazing. The one in California, they opened like a bar, but it wasn't like a bar for alcohol. It was a bar for smart drinks, which at the time was like, they were trying to, that was like, it's the cyberpunk drink. It's, you're Wired, you subscribe to Wired, you look at the internet on your Shell account and you drink ginkgo biloba, this is before Red Bull existed. This is before energy drinks existed in their current disastrous form. And so it was a lot of like, we got this ginseng drink. And so they're selling you these like $12 bullshit fucking drinks that improve focus. And it was this fancy, like they did it up like I think they called it like the Explorers Club or something like that. But it was meant to be like a old timey, it was almost like a steampunk vibe to it, which was gross. It was like a place where you was like, oh, there are like animal heads on the wall or something like that. And you're hanging out in this fancy bar while you're waiting to be deployed back to the front lines to be a BattleTech pilot or, whatever the situation was meant to be. It was rad. Like I had never seen anything like that at the time. Like that was right around the same time that I tried VR for the first time. And so the other location-based entertainment thing that was happening were the virtuality pods, where you had Dactyl Nightmare, the shooter, where you could run around in VR and there would be pterodactyls, and it sucked. But it was fancy and cool for the time. Not a very fun game. And again, the frame rate was abysmal, if I remember right. But anyway, BattleTech seemed like the future in a way that the VR stuff didn't at the time. Because you're like, man, I'm getting in a fucking cockpit. Like this is fucking, like it's, it felt real. And it seemed fucking awesome. And it was fucking awesome. And I don't know, that stuff, those centers closed. And I want to say Dave and Buster's, like some Dave and Buster's locations ended up getting BattleTech pods. And I think they would even play Red Planet on them, which is like, ugh. But yeah, the actual BattleTech centers, I think those were the only two. I think it was, maybe there's a third one in like Texas. But it was Walnut Creek, California, and it was Chicago. And I think those were the two for a long time. Someone brings pods to MagFest every year. That's actually fucking awesome. I should go to MagFest. Let's see here. There's more to this question. So have you recently looked into BattleTech Center emulation? No, I have not. It seems like something that would be very doable, but no. It seems that brew BattleTech centers could be a natural evolution of barcades, maybe, is what Rob asks. No, I think people would spill drinks on the controls. It would be a fucking disaster. If you did it at a bar and it was a proper bar and you had these BattleTech pods, people would be trying to fuck in the pods, which would be pretty cool. You'd have people spilling drinks in the pods. Like, it'd just be a fucking mess, dude. People would be ducking into the pods to fucking do rails. Yeah, version 2 and 3 are based off the Amiga 500 and ArcNet. Version 4 is Novell. System 5, I guess, is modified MechWarrior 4, probably on Windows XP. Yeah, I don't know. I have not seen these other later versions of it, so I don't really know. I'm just surprised people like us don't know people with BattleTech centers in their basement. Well, Rob, it sounds like MagFest fucking might have you covered on that front. I don't know. I'm still surprised there isn't a turnkey emulation system via Raspberry Pi or even some Windows 11 to XP hack. Yeah, it seems like that stuff should have gotten out there. I don't know. I don't know. BarnQuest in the chat says the MechWarrior 4 based ones are still around, which are cool but not as cool. And yeah, if they're not doing the work to really take advantage of what the pods can do, then that's not nearly as exciting. But yeah, they were awesome. There was nothing like it. It was completely. It was one of those things that felt absolutely 1,000% worth the money. But that's mostly because I didn't live near one. It's the sort of thing that like I could see, you know, much like when the QZar opened near us. I played a fuckload of laser tag. And eventually got to a point where I'm like, I don't want to play. I'm good. Let's go to the laser tag place and play Tekken 2 instead. And then they attached a tiki themed pizza place to the laser tag place, and they had all you can eat pizza nights. And then I had a chance conversation with a waitress there, and she said that she was looking for a roommate, and I jokingly said, I'll move in with you and 3 pizza waitresses. And she said, really? I said, yeah. And then I did. And that was, I don't know, whatever. That was awesome. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. The QZar was cool until it wasn't. I don't know. Like it's the sort of thing where you've played in those QZar arenas often enough that you know the layout of them and you know that they are completely falling apart. And you're like, ugh, like they haven't done anything to these things since this place opened. It's just kind of gross now. And, you know, there are probably people fucking in the QZar arena as well. I mean, why wouldn't you, honestly? Yeah, BattleTech centers are cool, Rob. It's interesting to hear that people still have some of those things. I'd be interested to see what that looks like. But like, I want to see the one that I remember from the early 90s, not this MechWarrior 4 based stuff. I want to see the ridiculous Amiga era of all of that. We were talking about what the worst song ever was, and Tom from Utah wrote in to say, I'm not a big social media user, so I don't know what the kids these days are into, but I would like to throw my hat in the ring for paging Dr. Beat for worst song. It's usually a company. Oh, it's because of TikTok and Instagram Reels that he's discovering this. I would say if you're encountering multiple videos featuring paging Dr. Beat on TikTok and Instagram Reels, that you are a big social media user. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. It's usually accompanied in a reel, short, or story with a heavily filtered woman doing an obnoxious dance with the smuggest face possible, pointing to text that's read by the robot voice. Am I just out of touch? Or is my inner Danny Glover getting too old for this shit? I think Dr. Beat, I think that's a great song. That was in that Burnout game that no one liked. The top-down crash mode XBLA and PSN game, Burnout Crash, I believe they called it. They treated the audio in that game like it was a pinball machine. That was the inspiration. And so an ambulance would go across some of the levels at times. And whenever the ambulance would appear, it would play paging Dr. Beat. And I don't know. I like that song. I agree with you that yes, watching smug people dance and pointing at text, watching anyone point at text is actually that is the worst thing you see on TikTok. Is like some fucking dipshit going pointing up at words and going and they just super suck. But yeah, as they say, you build your FYP brick by brick. And that's why I see a man in his late 50s making jokes about sucking off dudes behind a dumpster at a truck stop multiple times a week. Because we build our FYPs brick by brick. Moving on. Chad in Brooklyn writes in to say, oh, right, PS5 has activity cards. When was the last time you used an activity card on PS5? When was the last time you used community game help? Were these features bad ideas or just undersupported? They're not necessarily bad features. I tried to use the activity cards on Astrobot are actually terrible because for the most part, it points you at levels you've already finished. And so it's like, do you want to go do Retro Rampage 2? And I'm like, no, I did that one already. And then the only other activity card that would be relevant is like, do you want to go to the main home planet? And then I started it and it just went to the main menu. It didn't actually like warp me into game and get me right where I wanted to be or anything resembling that, the way that Spider-Man, the way they initially promised. I think the game help stuff, like all of that is not a bad idea. It just needs to be utilized. And a lot of developers didn't use it at all, and a lot of developers didn't really use it right. And so I don't think Astrobot uses the activity cards in a particularly good way. But the game help thing is interesting. I don't know. Like, I think the idea of like finding help for your games inside of the game itself or as a system level sort of benefit is a good idea. But I am never going to want to watch videos that are telling me what to do in a game. I want to read about it. Maybe see a screenshot, you know? And I think they said they were going to start allowing community submissions for the game hint stuff, which I don't think that's, I don't know, whatever. Harry from Ireland writes in with our last question. There are a few consoles that were either disappointments or outright laughing stocks in real time that have garnered cult followings years later. Removed from the chaos of their respective releases, I know there are a lot of folks who champion the Wii U, the Saturn, the Vita, and more. Is there a particular console or handheld that you think got a raw deal in real time? No, I don't. I think that I like. No, because I think the Saturn got exactly what it deserved in the marketplace. I think that the games that were coming out for the Saturn, the time it was coming out, like I don't know that I would say it got a raw deal. I think when you look back on its entire library, the entire worldwide library, it's better than it seemed at the time. But I feel largely the same way about the Dreamcast. Like, did it get a raw deal? Like, it's a bummer what happened with the Dreamcast, but I think when you look at the world and why those things happened, it's easy to look at it and go, I see why this all went down this way. And I think when you look at the entire Dreamcast library, there's some it's not great. There are amazing video games on the Dreamcast. And then there's like Spirit of Speed. And to say, whatever, all platforms have some bad video games on them. But I just feel like when I scroll through the Dreamcast library, 102 Dalmatians. I don't think the Aero Dancing games were very good. Some people liked that Alone in the Dark game, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. You know, there's just a lot of there's the library is not that large, and there's a lot of junk in it, or stuff that's like not really worth going back to. I don't know, Demolition Racer, No Exit, for example. Let's scroll a little bit more here. You know, I don't know. Like there's some good stuff on here, and then there's like Looney Tunes Space Race and Mag Force Racing, which I'm sure someone likes. NBA Hoops. Oof. And I guess like there's some of the first party stuff that I don't necessarily like care about that much either. You know, like Sega GT. Like I was never a big Sega GT guy. Like, yeah, I don't know. What do we? Oh yeah, Spec Ops 2 Omega Squad. Whatever. Yeah, I mean, you know, again, you can look through any library and find bad games in it, of course. But I think that the Dreamcast library just felt smaller because it was not here for as long of a time, right? And so it just felt like there were some third parties that just pumped games out for that thing. There was like how many Infogrames, like Hasbro / Infogrames games were on there? You know, Frogger. How many Frogger games came out on the Dreamcast? Too many. Tell you that much. I'll just tell you. Let's go look. Apparently it's just Frogger 2 Swampy's Revenge. That's still too many. Still too many. Yeah, that's a platform where like the highs are very high, but like there's a you know, there's a lot of kind of whatever on that thing. You know, the Wonder Swan. You know, maybe the Neo Geo Pocket Color, but also that thing was never gonna take off. Going up against the fucking Game Boy, it just wasn't gonna happen. I love the Neo Geo Pocket and the Neo Geo Pocket Color, but at the time it felt like I was the only one. I even liked the Atari Lynx. But you knew is, you know, like, yeah, okay, yeah. This weird shaped nightmare is gonna, yeah, sure. This with this questionable port of APB. Oh, thank you. I mean, thank you, but no, thank you. Did you see that this is, I don't know, this isn't really news, but did you see that Xbox changed back to friend requests? It's weird. They moved to a followers model a while ago. Years ago. Where instead of, you know, because the original Xbox and Xbox 360, it was like you sent someone a friend request and then they answered it or they didn't. At some point, they switched to a system where you just go follow somebody, and if they follow you back, then you are friends. I liked this system because it meant that I did not have to do any maintenance on any of that stuff or care about it. It was just like, yeah, people are following. Okay, sure, whatever. I don't know who these people are. And so now they've switched back to friend requests, and I opened up the Xbox as I was setting up this new PC. I opened up the Xbox app, and it was like, you've got 11 friend requests. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? Friend requests? Like, oh right, they switched it back. Okay, and I think like the following concept is still in there. So I think if I reject those friend requests, they just become followers. I don't. It's a weirdly clumsy kind of, I don't know. The change they made, I think, made sense at the time. I don't know, man. I like I think the change they made sense at the time, and it made sense for me as someone. I don't know what I think. I have like 7,000 Xbox followers. Whatever that's good for. And it was nice to not have to like deal with a bunch of friend requests coming in. It was nice to never have to think about that ever again. But at the same time, I think the other part that happened is like, oh, I don't want to. I don't think I want. I don't need to be friends with just about anybody on a console anymore. Like, what? Why does any of this stuff still exist? Like, it needs to exist, but like, in this day and age where more and more games are cross-play and whatever else, it just feels like the console closed, system friend list just doesn't feel like it has any value. And I'm sure some of that is because I just don't play a ton of multiplayer games on console these days. And so like the value of a friends list is just way lower to me than it used to be. Like I used to really care about that. I used to be like, oh yeah, I gotta get these people, and like, oh, and I can only have 100 friends on an Xbox 360. So if there are people who are not logging in on a regular basis, I've got to remove them and then do this. And like nowadays, it just seems like that stuff would happen over Discord. And so both Xbox and PlayStation have integrated Discord in some interesting ways that I think work really well. Like that's probably how I would do it at this point if I was gonna play games with people. I'd probably just do it that way. So yeah, I don't know. It's just those ecosystems used to seem like such a big deal. The Xbox friends list felt like it mattered so much, and later on the PS3 friends list felt kind of the same way. And yeah, I don't know. Like they feel like systems that need a bigger overhaul than like we're going back to friend requests. Like it just feels like there's something about like, maybe you should just gut this whole thing and replace it with something different. I don't know what that different thing would be, because surely Microsoft is not just going to go like, you should have a Discord account, because they don't own it. And so they're never going to just go, hey, we're going to offload all of this stuff to someone else. It's a nightmare for 5 or 6 different reasons. But yeah, I don't know. I do kind of miss the days of curating friend lists, but then suddenly there were 20 different friend lists, and like, oh, I can't care about any of this. I don't care about any of this. When it was just the Xbox friend list, it was easy. And then, at some point it was social media and all this other horse shit and whatever. Xbox should just add teams. They do have clubs, but maybe they could put capital T Microsoft Teams on the Xbox, huh? Did they do that already? They probably did. Can I take Microsoft Teams calls on an Xbox? I bet they can. Yeah, I don't know, man. It just feels like a lot of systems that came along a very long time ago and maybe could use a bigger rethink than this. But I don't know. I'm also like, I've been thinking more and more about some of this. I think part of it was with the PS5 Pro, and then in conjunction with that, this PS6 news. PS6 does not roll off the tongue super well. PS6. And I found myself wondering all over again, do you think that like people would have like a better, I think people would feel better about the Xbox Series X and S if they had done a full redesign of the UI in a way that made it feel brand new, instead of you just turning it on and going like, oh yeah, this is the Xbox, like just like the one I just packed up. Look at that. This sure does look almost exactly like the existing Xbox UI, huh? Like, I wonder if it would have been received better overall if they had done something different. But it couldn't just be different. It'd have to be good. And, then what? I don't know. I still don't think that either console has great UI. You just get used to it. You just realize where the shortcuts are. You realize like, oh, I have to hit triangle to bring my cursor up here on a PlayStation so that I can get to my settings, and so I can go stare at these HDMI settings for a while and figure out why the fuck it isn't working. Oh God. Like I every month when the PlayStation Plus monthly games come out, I remember, or actually it's not even every month when they send a notification saying like, it's your last chance to get the PlayStation games. I'm like, oh, right. I guess I should go do that. I never have any idea where the fuck to look. You know, and this is the store. There's a PlayStation Plus section next to the store, and they're both like, you can get there from both places, I think. But I don't know. Like it makes sense why they would bury that stuff, right? Because it costs some money when you add it to your account. So, you know, they don't necessarily want it to be automatic. But whatever. I don't know. I think all of this comes down to, I think a lot of the through line through a lot of our kind of console discussion, especially over the last few weeks, but really I think over the last few months, is it needs to feel new. I think that feeling is something that could be a new UI. It could be, and like those all contribute to that overall feeling, you know? And I think that stuff goes like it's intangible, but I think that not having a brand new look and feel to the whole thing helps contribute to the feeling that like the new consoles are not like quote unquote new, you know? You're like, oh, okay, yeah. Oh, I see, you know, the PlayStation 5, they did make changes. It's not just the PS4 UI, obviously, but it's pretty similar. And I think it's worse in some ways. At least it wasn't launched. They've patched it up. It's gotten better for sure. But I think the PS5 design is not conducive. Like, I don't think it looks great. I don't know. I just never did. And the current Xbox stuff, like, I get why they ended up where they ended up, but it just sucks. And especially with the Xbox stuff, now they're like, they don't do it for everything. They do it when they've got a big first party thing that they want you to know about. When they do the thing where they launch a full screen ad, basically saying like, Starfield's out now, or, you know, preload Call of Duty Black Ops 6 today, or whatever it is. I think that stuff just sucks, dude. Like, there's, you know, they've already got other positions on the dashboard that they could use to notify people about that sort of thing. And so I think the idea of doing a full screen takeover on a fucking video game console is super gross. Super gross. Bring back the days of the ads seeming like they were giving me something. Like a picture of Ving Rhames, for example, that I got off the Mission Impossible pack for, you know, the on the Xbox 360. Something of value, a picture of Tom Cruise. Give me a photo of Tom Cruise. Scientology's own. Give me the Scientology picture pack. Who's on that? It's the new singer from Linkin Park. It's Tom Cruise. You putting Beck on there? Who's your top 5, dead or alive? Scientology. I mean, Elron's got to be on there, right? You putting Travolta on there? I think maybe. Anyway. Yes, the 5 spot is just black, and it's implied that that's Xenu, but they can't tell you what it is. Yes, it's actually, yes, it's a black mark that's supposed to be David Miscavige's wife. I'm like, I don't know, where is she? Where is she? I don't know. I don't know. We've got the suppressive persons pack. Also a picture of a burrito. All right, last question. Brandon from St. Louis writes in and says, "Hey Jeff, so I got this wild urge to take a deep dive into some old MMOs, and I decided to reactivate my Ultima Online account from 1998. The second I logged in, I was hit by this massive wave of nostalgia. Not by the game itself, but by the old friends. My old guild is still standing, but most of the crew hasn't logged in since 2005, with the last straggler in 2010. Wow. Someone's going to think that about you now. Like, they're going to log back in and be like, someone logged in 2024. That's crazy. Curiosity got the better of me, so I hopped into EverQuest 2 and World of Warcraft to check out my old friends list, only to find a graveyard of offline legends. My WoW guild was also still standing, but no one was online for who knows how long. Just seeing their names brought back an avalanche of memories from all the wild adventures we had. It was kind of difficult seeing some of these people's names and not having any way to reach out to them. Has this ever happened to you, and are there any games you're nostalgic for?" Well, I mean, sure. Not, for privacy purposes, why would you put something in there that lets people contact you out of game or whatever, unless you specifically share that information of your own free will or whatever. But has this ever happened to me? Sure. Not so much. There's a guy in Malaysia. We think, I don't know, it's like me and like one other person, two other people from the IRC days would love to find this guy. And we have his Xbox Live account that is hooked up to a PC because sometimes it logs in and plays PC games, but never responds to messages. And there's just, in all attempts to get a hold of this person have failed. This person taught us all how to swear in Malaysian, which I used when I forget. Oh man, I interviewed a Malaysian developer at E3, and I ended up wheeling out some of my curse words on him, and he seemed impressed is not the word, but he at least acknowledged that they were. Oh yes, you're saying yes. I see. Oh yeah. Oh wow. But like, no, we don't know how to get a hold of this dude. He's just gone. There's another guy that like I don't know where this dude was from, but like we were rapping a lot online. We were doing online raps, and me and some Canadians, and there was another dude. I think he was from some other part of California, and he actually called. I have a phone number on my Tumblr that goes to a voicemail, and he called and he's like, "Hey man, I live in China now." And he left this message, and I was like gonna try to call him back, but like the message fucking self-destructed or something, and it's gone. And I'm like, shit, how do I get a hold of this dude? How do I get a hold of Skrilla T? God damn it! Just to say, hey, I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, it's the weird thing about the internet, man. Is just like, A, you never really know who any of these fucking people are. And B, they just fucking up and vanish. And then you're like 15 years later going like, what happened to that fucking dude? I remember I bought a bunch of fucking bootleg cable boxes off that guy. Oh, no, that's, yeah. No, they weren't even, they were a DirecTV buy. Anyway. Like, yeah, I remember I bought a bunch of fucking bootleg television gear off of this fucking dude. Where'd he go? Whatever happened to that guy? What happened to the guy that like that told us all about the weird porn film he was obsessed with? Actually, I could find that guy. I knew his real name. I could probably dig that guy up. So this many years later, you start, you know how you find people online? You know how you find people when like, if someone in your like circle vanishes and you don't really have like all of their information, like maybe you've got some of it. At this point, you can guarantee that someone has mentioned their name in an obituary. Survived by blah, 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 blah. And once you've gotten to that point where you found, okay, this is this person being mentioned in an obituary, you've got a town, and you've got the names of like 4 or 5 relatives that you can, like, if you're like, okay, like this person really vanished and we're actually kind of worried, like we should try to find, okay, I've dug people up that way. There are a lot of different ways, but sometimes you don't have all of the information, and so you end up going down weirder roads to do that stuff. But yeah, I don't know. It's kind of the weird thing about the internet, right? Is that there's just like sometimes people just up and fucking vanish, and you're just like, oh, I have a vague idea of where this person lived, like where in the world they were. And I know that they have a username, and we can start searching that username and see if they entered a real name or any other identifying details alongside that username on any other website, and see if we can eventually dig it up. But if people are tight with it, then they're tight with it, and that's that. It's kind of the weird thing about being a public figure of sorts on the internet is like, I'm out here using my real name, and I have for a very long time, and so it's just kind of like whatever. But yeah, anyway. If someone in your circles vanishes and you get worried about them, or if you're just like, hey, whatever happened to that guy? That is my advice. Of course, they would probably be super weirded out by you contacting them out of the blue, like, hey, buddy, remember all the horrific jokes from this chat room 30 years ago? You know what I mean? Anyway, that is the end of the show. Thanks, everybody, for coming through and listening to the program. I am happy that my voice seems to be holding up. I was worried coming into the show that I was like, oh my God, my throat's going to be destroyed. This is just going to all go south. And whatever, but yeah, I don't know. I'm like weirdly sweating. This is just like, whatever. I'm sweating out a cold. It's fine. I feel like I'm on the mend for sure. So, barring anything crazy, I should be back tomorrow. We'll stream maybe some UFO 50, maybe a little Dead Rising. We'll see if there's anything else out, and new worth checking out as well. But that's I really want to play UFO 50 because I have not played it. I know, I know some folks who have, and it sounds kind of cool. So I am very much looking forward to seeing that game for myself. So yeah, I should see you in the morning again, barring any sort of weird illness. But take care, and I'll see you on the podcast next Tuesday.